Hello, and welcome once again to a very special edition of the Small Bear Show. I'm your host, Alexis Johnson. I founded Nocturnicorn Books as it's a division of Darkest Wine Media. We're expanding now into filmmaking, which is something that I've aspired to do since I was a kid. When I did a it took me a couple of months to do a 5 minute animated film with, cell animation. And boy, it was not bad, but it was upside down. It came out upside down. And so as I was just telling the people, our guests are Alexis Krasilovsky, who's an award-winning filmmaker and producer and author, novelist, poet. Her films include the groundbreaking um, The End of the Art World, and which she profiled artists such as Andy Warhol, Jasper Johns, Robert Rauschenberg. The techniques that Alexis used on this film were quite as startling and revolutionary as the artists that she profiles. And that is just that is just one film that she made. You know, she made Women Behind the Camera, which again, you talk about sort of a pioneer of only a feminist um, activism.
Produced by
Also,
Vanessa Smith, who's also here.
yes, so that was produced by Vanessa H. Smith, who is also here with us today, and yes, and as well as more recently, Let Them Eat Cake, which again was just this incredible story of how we get our pastries and our cupcakes and our Eden goodness and all of the labor that goes into it, and the really the ecological issues, the social justice issues, all these issues that are, inter I was about to say interstitial, but that doesn't make any sense. Intersectional with things like climate change and so forth. And let's see, just in order of the people see, Vanessa's here, right? Because I don't see her on the Vanessa's here, right?
Yes.
For some reason I don't see. Okay.
You have to go, you have to slide down on the side.
Oh, I have to slide down.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. So, and then next we have Vanessa Hedwig Smith, who's a brilliant filmmaker, documentarian. Her work has included being the location manager in India, as well as the technical advisor or historical researcher for um, a, um, a film called In Search of Kundun, which featured Martin Scorsese, and it's about Martin Scorsese's film Kundun, which was about His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the struggle for liberation for the Tibetan people. And that is just one thing she's done. She and I have joined forces together to create a documentary film, which is inspired by the a anthology series that I'm editing and publishing as Nocturnicorn Books. It's called Burning Hearts, a Wildfire Relief anthology, and we have some of the world's foremost writers. It's going to come out in two volumes, actually, which is Vanessa's suggestion. It's a very helpful suggestion because I think that the stories and the nonfiction and the poetry really deserve their own space. And I think as curators of art as well, because your films are art, and about artists as well. I think that and also your installations, and very, very interesting work that Vanessa has done. And she approached me about collaborating on a documentary film about sort of it's a kind of a it's evolved into almost a meta documentary about the making of this project, which keeps expanding and growing and adding more people. We just recently acquired for the poetry section a man named Ma Yangbo, who is a university professor at the University of Nanking in China. He is a world-renowned poet and translator. He is the man who translated Moby Dick into Chinese.
Oh,
Okay,
whoa.
so he's kind of like an international arts ambassador, and he just recently he just I was on Facebook message with him earlier today, and he offered me. He said that he's been having being attacked online. He said an American lunatic, no, American female madwoman attacked him on Facebook, and he had to block them. And I said, well, I've had a lot of trouble with people attacking me, and he said, well, I will protect you if you move to China. I will protect you. And I was like, wow. So I've been invited by China's leading poet, avant-garde poet, to 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 go live in China under his protection, which is just mind blowing. Okay, so he's just one person. We have so many people in this anthology, which we're going to be discussing, as well as the documentary series. People who are also people who are involved with we're talking about, including is Bill Plimpton, and I'm trying to see if I have Bill's. Oh, yes. So, Bill Plimpton, well, my connection with Bill is that he both did the cover for and the and blurbed endorsed my sort of dark satire series called Fucked Up Fairy Tales, and this is the cover that he did for Fucked Up Fairy Tales Volume 2, which I created with my friend Bertie Walker. And these are kind of like they're as extremely dark as it might suggest, but also raunchy, but also a good deal of fun. And it's really social satire because I'm talking about using the kingdom of euphoria as an allegory for our times. And so that is Vanessa. Then Pickles. Oh my gosh. Alea Celeste Williams. Where do I begin? Alea Celeste Williams is somebody that I met through Reddit um, groups having to do with investigating different kind of, I guess you would call them conspiracy theories. Some might call them conspiracy theories, and some might just call them facts. We began to research this extensive and jaw-droppingly horrifying history of human experimentation by the US government that goes back to the 1960s. And it's involved with a secret project called MK Ultra. And this was the subject. I was just watching Martin Scorsese's film Shutter Island, which I'd seen in theaters, right? And I was just I was watching. I was just amazed to realize and remember he was talking about exactly the same thing. So this is something that has gotten the attention of especially the complicity of the present government of the United States, which I believe to be an outlaw government, in with Russia. Russia began the mind control experiments, as well as the use of such things as psychedelic drugs, LSD, microwave radiation, in during the Cold War, and we may or may not get into that. The point is that's how we met, and Alea and I swiftly found common ground in so many different things. Our sense of humor was very much alike. We both have an incredibly dark sense of humor because we've been traumatized so much. But the only way to respond to trauma that's healthy or any good is to laugh at it. And I think always think of the theorist and literary critic Mikhail Bakhtin, who wrote Rabelais in his times, right? And he was actually writing about it was a satirical attack on Stalin, but it was also folded in with this brilliant analysis of laughter, a history of laughter. And for my viewers, all three of them, and especially this distinguished panel, Mikhail Bakhtin's Rabelais in his times, read it. It's just it's incredibly funny too. I mean, it's about laughter. And so Alea and I began to collaborate mostly just to help her out, I think, with her, she helped her mother for many years. Her mother was disabled and passed away a few years ago, I believe. We've known each other, it feels like forever now. And we both have sort of had a lot of strange phenomena, shall we just say, in our lives, and really have a lot of sleeplessness and pain and trauma, and it's almost like brain trauma we've shared. I stopped because I have the neurodegenerative disorder. Literally stopped writing, and I stopped participating in social media, and I just fell apart for 5 years. I was, spent most of the day just on my back, just sometimes drooling on myself. Sometimes, I couldn't move, I couldn't walk. I had to rehab myself. And throughout this entire time, Alea was so compassionate. I've never met anybody who's so compassionate before and just completely accepting and so in love with nature, so in love with animals, and so gentle, and I consider it a virtue to be gentle. I consider it a virtue to be peaceful and all these things which are in this age of toxic masculinity and misogyny and you know weaponized hatred towards just about anybody who's not a you know fucking cis het white billionaire Nazi. I mean, this is where we've arrived, folks. And I think anybody looking back at this, you know, when it's archived, this video, when people, 300 years from now, historians are looking back at this era, they're gonna ask, how did this happen? And who was the resistance movement? We are the resistance movement. Just the same way, my entire life, I always asked myself, what would you do if the Nazis showed up?
Well,
What
we're
would you
doing it
do,
now.
right? If the Nazis took over, it was a really dark joke that I always had with my ex-wife, say, and who I met at UC Davis. We were both comparative literature majors. Anyway, so that's Alea and I sort of helped each other get back on track, and we began to collaborate on poems, on songs. We did this song called Pontiff of Shadows, which was sort of like about a dark pope. And she's an incredibly good artist. I mean, her stuff is like, whenever she shows it to me, I'm just like, I can't believe that's, you know, it's not in a museum or something because it's like Brock or whatever, or it's like Rembrandt. And she's very modest. Well, she doesn't, I think, Pickles is gradually beginning to realize that she's amazing, because we did this dark poetry collection called Thunderstruck, which I edited and published with our dear friend Sandy DeLuca, who is a poet, an author. She's known as the Queen of Horror. She lives in near Providence, Rhode Island. She was born and raised in Providence, Rhode Island, and she's Italian American, Italian heritage, and she's also a witch. And she's done written spells for to the I forget the exact title, something by Silver Ravenwolf. She wrote spells for
Oh,
Sybil Ravenwolf to stir a magic cauldron, I believe. So so you know the cover, she did the cover art. Um, and that's a sort of one of her um it's deceptively simple design, except when you look at it and you realize that there's about four levels of hair, and there's this dark matter which doesn't really make any sense. And then there's this raven, which a raven is kind of growing out of her hair. So you see that. So her stuff is extremely organic, and her motif is mushrooms. And yes, that kind of mushroom. So, and the design was done by our friend in England, Adrian Baldwin, who is the little show and tell for you, who is the also designs this magazine, which was I believe it was a World Fantasy Award-winning magazine called Phantasmagoria, which is edited and published by our friend Trevor Kennedy in Belfast, Ireland. And this contains work by such people as, well, Ramsey Campbell, who's the living legend of horror. And I'll find this for you. It's also got an interview with, I think, David J. Scow. We're going to be talking about him too. So this is Adrian Baldwin. This is the ad for Adrian, right? There he is. And then opposite, an opposing page is, a poem, an original poem by, Master of Horror Ramsey Campbell himself. And we have also, yes, I know Ossiana is so chuffed, right? Because, yeah, I mean, we're going to be talking about some of the amazing projects like the William S. Burroughs book, the Bauhaus book, oh my gosh, and the Burning Hearts, of course. And so this also features the Rift That Would Not Die by me. It's about Black Sabbath. So this Black Sabbath are ongoing characters of mine, and I've written three books about Ozzy, featuring Ozzy as a character. It's just not really Ozzy. It's a sort of it's almost like a metafictional Ozzy. And so then we have Ossiana Tepfenhart. Oh my gosh. So do we do the big reveal now, or do we wait, or
I mean, if you wanna, like, I'm kind of taking your lead. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this.
yeah,
So,
this is really, well, it's absolute beginners, right? I feel like we're all absolute beginners in some sense, and also oh,
what is the running time of this program altogether? I think that would determine whether to do the reveal now or at the end. Will it be
okay,
at two
well,
o'clock or 3 o'clock?
it
What is your running
depends
time?
on so I think about till 3 o'clock, if that's okay with everybody, because there's a lot to cover. Before I forget, I almost forgot why I brought this up, the Thunderstruck book up in the first place, and why I say that, you know, that Alea is amazing despite her self-effacing ways. We got a rave review in Cemetery Dance magazine for this. Okay, so the people who don't know what Cemetery Dance magazine is, I mean, it's the horror magazine of record. I mean, this is officially endorsed by none other than Stephen King. And who said, basically every time that Cemetery Dance magazine comes out, I'm going to grab myself a copy, and I'm going to read that front to back. So guaranteed Stephen King knows who we are. And there's another Stephen King connection. Actually, there's several Stephen King connections we're going to be talking about. But so Oceana and I started something called Last News on the Left, which is incredible. Actually, she started and then she invited me on board. And it's a sort of an alternative news organization It's sort of springing from Ossiana is an influencer, and people, I guess the I only recently gotten to know what an influencer is, because it's a sort of a phenomena of our times, right? And they are Oceana is non-binary transgender. They are a an influencer whose Medium followers number more than 50,000. They were telling me on the last time they were on my show that they did the first article on Medium. They did had I believe it was 500,000 hits. So
Yeah.
right, 500,000 hits, and they made $20,000 from this. So we can all learn a lot from Oceana about how to make money on, by writing, right?
Um, I guess, yeah. Like as far as influencers go, I know it's kind of a tainted word in this day and age because everybody expects us to all look like Kim Kardashian and to be like, look, I'm going to hawk this product that totally doesn't work but costs $60 a month for like 50 months. But I'm a little bit of an alternative influencer because my form of influence, while I do model, most of it is written word. And I've been noticing an increasing number of news stations kissing the ring of the Cheeto in chief. So I kind of realized that every single one of us right now is seeing different perspectives of what's really going on. So while I'm doing like roundups of like news from like reliable leftist organizations, I'm also inviting other people to just report on what they're seeing on their side of the stuff, as long as it's not, fascist leaning. So, um,
Yeah,
anybody who wants to like actually open up a dialogue and be like, hey, this is what's going on. There's currently a gag order that's been issued by, Doge about NIH. We're starting to lose a lot of our research. Here's how you can back it up. I want people to have that platform.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so good. And I have a lot of research that I did on neurodivergency and an expose on a NIH funded study that was for at the you know to the tune of $2 million, which was there. This took place at the UC Davis Mind Institute, which is my alma mater, where there were this woman who was my neuropsychologist, and I will name her name, Kimberly Elizabeth Lanny. She works at the Roseville facility of Kaiser Permanente, was experimenting on low verbal autistic children, restraining them and subjecting them to decibel levels of more than 110 10 decibels, in order to test whether or not they would be stressed out by this nonsense. And the taxpayers, this was taxpayer funded and study, through
Did
the
they also do a
AMA.
study on whether water is wet?
Yes, exactly. Well, this was, you know, amazingly enough, nobody else, saw this, this horror hiding in plain sight. When because, the whole saying, a slogan among autistic people is nothing about us without us. And so, because I'm studying this research on autistic people, I reached out to and the major autistic researchers, or actually autistic researchers, such as um, Henny Cooperstein, and basically I asked all the world's leading autistic researchers who are actually autistic, and to whether or not they would review my work. And I got a hold of a person, also non-binary, um, transgender person who Pickles and I have had on the show when it was the Small Baron Pickles show, named Lyric Rivera, and who's an amazing Pickles. Could you tell the people a little bit about Lyric Rivera? Because yeah, we're probably not going to go by the order of questions, just to let you know. But Pickles,
Can I say, by the way, you haven't introduced Ellyn.
oh my
Ellyn,
gosh, oh my
all
gosh,
right.
so sorry, Ellen. Well, Ellen is the reason that we're here. I mean, Ellen is the reason that we're here. So, Ellen Maybe, oh my gosh, thank you so much. So Ellen Maybe, and this goes a little bit back by way of introduction, how I got to know Ellen Maybe. Um, I was teaching composition at Cal State Dominguez Hills, where I got my master's degree, and my master's thesis was on a woman named Gloria Anzaldúa, who's one of the greatest theoreticians of and authors, poets, a groundbreaking um, person, really changed the face of how we see intersectionality, whether that has to do with race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, whether it has to do with ability or disability, whether that, and especially having to do with gender issues and sexuality issues. She wrote the book Borderlands, La Frontera, The New Mestiza, and I actually was got um, her personal phone number from Aunt Luke Books, who published this book. Um, and unfortunately, she died while I was, finishing up my thesis. So I never had a chance to interview her. I did, however, have a chance to interview Paula Gunn Allen, the Native American author and scholar. So that was part of my research, my background research. And anyway, this is just to go to say that I first heard about Ellen Mabie's from from my coworker that I did this class, a composition class with. Her name is Melissa Williams, and she still works at Cal State Dominguez Hills. And she said, "Well, there's this woman who's associated with this institution called Beyond Baroque." And I said, "Oh, I know what Beyond Baroque is. That's where John Doe and Exene Cervenka met, right?" And they fell in love and they formed a band called X, right? And I was like, "Yeah, I've been there. I mean, it's amazing, right? It's Beyond Baroque, right? It's crazy." And she said, "Yeah, there's this woman named Ellen Mabie, and she had the same job." And correct me if I'm wrong, Ellen, because it's I'm so starstruck. I'm still starstruck by this woman. That she had the job that as she ran the bookstore at Beyond Baroque, which was a job that was held formerly by Exene Cervenka. And so I got to know Ellen through Facebook, and we became friends. We, Ellen is so generous and so kind and so supportive of really anybody who wants to have who is interested in poetry or the arts, so enthusiastic and supportive. I can't say enough good things about her. I don't know anybody who doesn't like her. And if you don't like her, you're an asshole. Um, people who her fans include um, Jackson Brown, Grail Marcus, the author of Mystery Train and Lipstick Traces, that Grail Marcus, um, a guy named Henry Rollins, and you may have heard of him. And of course, we have Viggo Mortensen, the star of Lord of the Rings, um, and you know, some people like, I don't know, Exene Cervenka and John Doe. Actually, Viggo Mortensen was the ex-husband of Exene Cervenkova, aka Exene Cervenka. So those are people who, she who are huge fans and devotees of hers. So give you a little bit of background about her. And I soon discovered her amazing connections, she invited me, actually, Richard Modiano, who was the then executive director of Beyond Baroque, invited me to read um, from, as a featured speaker at Beyond Baroque, and that's how um, I came to read from the Death Jazz, which Ellyn encouraged me to put, to make into a book because previously it was on a web page called the uh, the Outsider Writers Collective Department of Post-Reality Studies page, which is a mouthful. And I had also published a few of these poems in a magazine called Vile. It's extremely experimental work by Patricia Cram. Anyway, so what has Ellyn done that is not remarkable? For one thing, okay, she has a SAG card, Screen Actors Guild card. How did she get this? Well, she was in a film called Dancing at the Blue Iguana. Now, Dancing at the Blue Iguana was made by a man named Michael Radford, who's best known. This other film that he's really, really well known for is called Il Postino, and is about how um, Pablo Neruda wound up in Italy, and it's in Italian language. So, Dancing at the Blue Iguana is a very, very the I mean we have two distinguished filmmakers here, so and we're all fans of movies. So Michael Radford did a very, very experimental approach um, as far as this film. He did extensive rehearsals with the stars, um, um, Daryl Hannah, who was very, very, very well-known actress. I always associate her with Blade Runner, and as well as Jennifer Tilly and and Sandra Oh is also in this film. Sandra Oh, then they all play strippers. So, the Blue Iguana is a strip club, and these women, what's amazing about this film, which could have been extremely, kind of sleazy, you know, because and it actually it lovingly lingers on these incredible bodies. You know, it's a female gaze movie. It's a female gaze film. And I think that Michael Radford is a feminist filmmaker. He's obviously a feminist filmmaker. Um, he wanted to have Ellyn in the movie because of her iconic poetry and her style, which is very kind of combines whimsy with a very acute and sardonic wit and a very a satirical takes on such things as sort of like hippies and counterculture, and also there's loving references to Broadway show tunes, to films. She went to film school in Prague, and so she's performed at Glastonbury Festival. She's performed on MTV, the BBC, Lollapalooza, South by Southwest. So again, that is Ellyn Mabey, and so a brilliant, brilliant human being, wonderful human being. Now, Ellyn Mabey, um, since I do these sort of literary tributes, which are unusual insofar as that, okay, so the first literary tribute that I did was called Anthem, a tribute to Leonard Cohen. And I I was inspired by somebody, a mutual friend of Ellyn and mine who I met at Beyond Baroque, Marie Lecraven. So Marie, a shout out to Marie Lecraven, who's been extremely helpful and kind. She's one of the players in this story. And so I I approached Ellyn. Ellyn and I were chatting as we do, and oh, you're a critter, you're a critter, and
Yeah, Blitzo was meowing and he was starting to have a tantrum, so
oh,
he
a
just wants
beautiful
screen
kitty,
time.
beautiful,
Yeah, I
and
have five in the house, but three of my own, so
aw,
you're gonna see them
beautiful.
ham it up.
We have a Lahore pigeon that's adopted us. It's the most remarkable bird ever seen. Have you ever heard of a Lahore pigeon? They have their feathers on their talons. They're
And
weird
they also
birds.
act like cats.
They also act like cats, right? Yeah, they're weird birds, but beautiful. I mean, they have the iridescent sort of sheen on their breast, and they're like black with like these white stripes and a hawk-like beak. And this bird kind of started out like an asshole, frankly, but then and we've sort of bonded, and now we just sort of hang out with each other. And so I approached Ellyn and I said, look, Ellyn, so I'm doing all these books that are literary tributes, and these are unprecedented, unprecedented. I mean, nobody ever did a literary tribute to Black Sabbath. When I approached David J. Scow about this, he said, oh, look, man, literature and Black Sabbath have nothing to do with each other, right? Nothing. And I said, well, your colleague John Shirley apparently does not agree. So anyway, we'll be talking about Shirley. And Ossiana's like, Shirley, John Shirley, yep. And I have a little show and tell for that as well. Um, so anyway, and I approached Ellyn and I said, look, I would love to do a tribute to you and calling it, well, naturally, just like the Ellyn Mabey coloring book, the Ellyn Mabey poem by our friend Emily Frank, and so I said, well, what do we call it? The Ellyn Mabey tribute anthology. And she said, oh, well, that's very sweet of you. It's very kind, very honored. Um, I'm sorry. I was kind of, forgive my impression, my Ellyn Mabey impression. Very honored. And
That's good.
and she said, well, look, we've had these wildfires here, and you should do something about the wildfires. And I was like, yeah, yeah, you're right, because I have so many friends who are from my old stomping grounds of LA. I lived in LA for 20 years. And I said, okay, we'll do something about the wildfires. We'll do a relief anthology. But I said, you have to give me a name. And Ellyn immediately came up with Burning Hearts. And so I said, okay, Burning Hearts it is. And it has basically it's gone from a book series to now a documentary film, which I'm making with Vanessa here. So my gosh, I'm just overwhelmed by the number of people involved with these anthologies who are have very, very kind to me and taken me under their wing. And sometimes I tend to be a bit I don't know if insensitive is the right word. Well, I'm just very focused. I'm very focused on work, and I've always just worked my butt off. But I want to take a step back and explain a few things. So this is called the Small Bear Show, right? And I also have a prop. Gail, I'll be back in a second. So This is the origin story of the Small Bear Show. In case anybody is wondering, this has to do with the movies. I know y'all love movies. Okay, so when I was born Halloween Day, 1966, which is a birthday which I incredibly enough share with my friend Nelson Gary, who is also, well, we'll be talking about Nelson Gary pretty soon because I'm also publishing two of his novels. And yeah, the exact same day and year as Nelson Gary is a forensic psychologist and poet and contributor to several of my books. Now, I was born, and there's a man named John Cordy, and he was married at that time to a woman named Beulah Chang, who is still around. I believe she lives in Mill Valley. Now, John Cordy is a guy who first came to my mother's attention. My mom and dad went to Palo Alto High School in which is Palo Alto, of course, is in the Silicon Valley. And at the time, there was no silicon because it was the 1950s. And they went to high school. Well, my mom actually was in eighth grade with a woman named then Gracie Wing. And she married her neighbor, a redhead, um, funny looking redhead named Jerry Slick. And she was in a band called the Great Society. She had a couple of songs that she wrote. One of them was called White Rabbit, which contained the line "Go Ask Alice," and the other one was "Somebody to Love." And she went over to a band that was previously existed called the Jefferson Airplane, and
Favorite.
right, and my mom was in home economics, in eighth grade home economics with Grace Slick, right? And she was a bit of a
Bro.
snob. Like the whole thing about like the anecdote that my mom always brings up is that, you know, as you do with home economics, right? You talk about practical matters like doing your laundry, right? And Gracie Wing was just very, very dismissive of this. Oh, we have somebody who does that. We send our laundry out, right? So she was kind of a snob. Also, and this is even more amazing, I know that Ellyn and we all are, I think we're all, in love with Joan Baez, right? Joan Baez was a classmate of my parents at Palo Alto High School. And in fact, our my aunt um, who lives, Gail Randall, who's she's the granddaughter of Herbert Bolton, and she is very proud of that, as we all are. She actually asked Joan, after one of her shows, if she remembers, my parents, Stephen and Beatrice Johnson. She said, yes, of course. And so my mom was working. My dad attended Yale University and then Berkeley. My mom went to University of Pennsylvania. She was working after graduation. She was working at California State University, San Francisco, in the film ordering department, right? And so she came across this guy, the work of this guy named John Cordy. And John Cordy had made a film called The Language of Faces for the American Friends Service Committee. The American Friends Service Committee is, for those of you who don't know, the viewers, they're the Quakers. And this was a very, very powerful film, black and white film, which is up on YouTube. We can watch it on YouTube. And it's about the language of faces, which is the vocabulary of faces. Very, very interesting and innovative concept, right? And so now what is this strange obsession with small bears? Well, so John Cordy and his wife Beulah Chang sent me, who were friends of my mother. So my mom became friends with John Cordy, the filmmaker, and his his wife, Beulah Chang. And I guess they were close enough that when I was born, I got a whole lot of teddy bears, man. I got a whole lot of teddy bears, but the one that really, I guess, was a very expensive teddy bear because it's a stiff, right? It's a stiff bear, um, like this. Okay, this is a stiff bear, teddy bear. They're the Rolls Royce of teddy bears. And so there's a lot of really, really interesting bears connections with my family. When my dad was growing up, one of his closest friends, and it was actually until until he died. I forget when he died. It was in 2000, something like that. It's a man named Michael Ritchie. Michael Ritchie for the viewers, and I think Vanessa and I should make a film about, like, directors who we know but we don't know, right? Because Michael Ritchie went on to make such films as The Candidate with Robert Redford, and John Cordy was the DP on The Candidate. He went on to make another film that he made was called Twice Upon a Time with for George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola. It was Lucasfilms and was produced by the Ladd Company, which is the Ladd Company also produced Blade Runner. We're going to get into the Blade Runner connection. There's really fascinating connections here. And Twice Upon a Time also featured one of the people that worked on Twice Upon a Time was a man named David Fincher. He did the special effects. He was 17 years old. Okay, so by the time that John Cordy had made Twice Upon a Time, he'd made several films for Lucasfilm, and then he went on to make a TV film called Caravan of Courage, an Ewok adventure. And this is based on a story by George Lucas, which was inspired by Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So you can kind of start to see this pattern of connection, right? You go back to Michael Ritchie, he's best known for what film? Somebody can tell me. It was remade.
Okay, is it Deliverance? Is it Deliverance?
Um, it
Or
is
maybe not.
That was an incredible film. Oh, say so. I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a visual hint. Michael Ritchie
Mole Bear?
made a film called
Bad News Bears?
The Bad News Bears, as
Oh
in,
wow, I got that.
which is iconic, culturally iconic. I always think of, Dr. Evil, right? Dr. Evil in Gold. Was it Gold? Um, was it was one
Goldfink.
of the Austin Powers films? He says, you know,
Oh.
not as
It's
Dr. Evil,
Bad
but
News Bears.
yes, was it Fat Bastard? As Fat Bastard? I think he says, and that would be bad news bears for you, Walter Matthau. Anyway,
I love that series, man. It's one of my
yeah.
favorites.
So you have this guy, John Cordy, who was was the man who had this idea for a mobile film studio, which had up to that point, films were kind of bound on, studio lots and in Hollywood and you know, this is I mean, we take it for granted now. Films like Apocalypse Now, um, but then the idea of having a mobile film studio was revolutionary, right? So, he was, you know, George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola were absolutely blown away by this guy, right? Because, working with him, he also revolutionized animation as well. if you see the movie Twice Upon a Time, you'll have an idea on what he some of the techniques that he invented involving illuminating felt, cutout felt. Um, and so
Um, can I
yes,
ask a question?
yes.
Yeah, I'm looking at the clock and it's 1:55. I'm very eager to hear what Ellen maybe has to share with us today. So John Cordy is very interesting as a filmmaker. We could talk on and on about that, but I'm wondering if we could,
Okay.
I'm hoping it won't take too long to get around to hearing what
Um,
Ellen maybe
well,
and
this
others
is
have to say.
I mean I respect that, respect you so much. This is the reason that we're here. And as a person with a you know, you know, special learning disability and neurodegenerative disorder, I kind of have to hold my own um, timing because, one of my disabilities is called apraxia. So, in other words, if you ask me a question, or if you ask me to do something, I couldn't do it because of the brain trauma. Similarly, if I'm on a roll, the only reason that I can talk is because I have to force myself to sort of start the ball rolling and keep it rolling. So, also, this is the entire reason that we're here. The entire reason that we're here is the Small Bear Show. The entire reason we're here, I was leading into um, talking about civil rights. Okay, so hence the reference to the American Friends Service Committee, hence the fact that, well, okay, so I will switch gears. Of course, we love Ellen Mabey. Ellen Mabey is another reason that we're doing this show. But the show began really the provenance of this show, and you're a very distinguished filmmaker as well as Vanessa Smith, and Ellen Mabey is a very distinguished actress as well. But this is all incredibly germane, but I can't be hurried up or get to the point. Because I was going to tell you, okay, so I'll switch gears. One of my friends that I had through our church, actually, the Vedanta Society, um, was a woman named Catherine McGregor. And I think you'll start to see the big picture that unifies everything and the reason that we're all here. We're fighting fascism. We're activists. We're the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars. Okay? Caravan of Courage. Think about it. An Ewok Adventure. It's a Star Wars film. Okay, so Catherine McGregor started her as an actress on Broadway and in films, and she was in some major plays. She was a friend of people like Marlon Brando, and she was a good friend of mine. And she was best known as the actress who portrayed Mrs. Olson in the long-running TV series Little House on the Prairie. But the reason I'm bringing her up, and this is one of the connections here, I understand that it's not easy dealing with somebody who's nonlinear like me, but granted, I need accommodations. I'm going to ask for accommodations. I require accommodations. Nonlinear is how I work. So, Catherine McGregor was a close friend of James Baldwin. So you start to see the connections here. James Baldwin, of course, the American novelist and essayist who marched with Martin Luther King. Um, and you're right. So was a good friend of mine. One of the people who, because when you have disabilities, special learning disabilities especially, people tend to attack you, try to hurry you up, rush you through things, not accommodate your disability, not even know your disability exists. And I spent my entire life, adult life, thinking I was an idiot. Okay, so I had I had friends who stood up for me and supported me. And one of these people was Catherine McGregor. Okay. Another person who really, really helped me along was a guy named Tom Sullivan. He's a close personal friend of Betty White, who I worked with. I worked with both of them. And he also was helped in his life by Martin Luther King Jr. and Helen Keller and Muhammad Ali. So you kind of see where this is going. And I apologize for being emotional here, Alexis, but I need to get all this out. It's incredibly germane. We're fighting a war. There's nobody else. There's nobody else here who's, we're under a state of siege. Obviously, I'm speaking to the choir here. Okay, so Ellen maybe. Now, I have prepared some questions for Ellen maybe, and this gets into exactly what we're talking about. So Ellen, your poetry often carries threads of social justice. So you weave your personal experiences into a larger tapestry of meaning. And I often see, there's also a very, very powerful aspect of humor, which we're going to get to. But some of your poems are quite striking, such as the 2016 poem. Um, and how do you see the relationship between you as an individual, your individual artistic expression, and the sort of collective struggle that um, we're all participating in?
Well, I mean, I definitely feel a sense of what's happening in general in the world. Just the different things, all the things that mix together in the work, like you mentioned, like humor and different social issues and stuff. And when the poems come, they just sort of come when they're ready. So they sort of end up just whatever seems to be going on. I tend not to revise generally, and just sort of they come when they're ready, but affected by things going on. So there's a sense of that. But I don't know. It just sort of, it always seems to do that. When a poem's ready, it seems to just happen like that. And it's
Yeah,
what's going on. But yeah.
yeah.
Wait,
It's
do you
yeah.
get pings?
I'm sorry.
Sorry?
Ellen, do you get pings too?
Do I get what?
I
Ping?
call it like pings. Sometimes, like a lot of times when I'm writing, like I'll just start having like these recurring, it's almost like a recurring reminder, like almost like an alarm clock that goes off in my head. I'm like, I have to write this down right now. And I'm like, okay, it's out. And then I'll hit publish and then like I can't really explain how it happens, but it just happens on its own.
That's interesting. That makes sense, but yeah, poem when it's ready, it's just kind of happens. Yeah. That's interesting how you say it like that. Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. It's all different things that are going on, but as it happens in the imagery when it comes, when it's ready, and it can be whatever length it is. It just kind of has this way of happening. Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't really study poetry or anything. I didn't study, anything. So it just kind of, yeah, it seems very natural though. Interesting
Yeah.
thing.
I always
Um,
call those pings.
Things. And I would love it if if maybe Ellen, if you could read something.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking to read maybe Whiff of Wonder. How's that? Is that a
Yes,
good one?
one of my favorite, and it contains the line "a collective paw." Yeah, one of my
Yeah.
favorites.
Thank you. So this
Thank
is
you.
called Whiff of Wonder. There's such a pain in the world. Like we all stepped on a thumbtack at the same time, and we can either take a step forward or a step back. There is something in the collective paw of the world holding us up. For some, it's music. For some, it's a rainbow. For some, it's nature. For some, it's love. The world must contain wonder when it feels all the breath and wishes contained. Even a whiff of wonder at the right moment in time can do wonders living in the world.
Hmm.
I think,
And I love your I know you don't do this intentionally, well neither do I, but your use of poetic devices like assonance and consonants and internal rhymes is incredible. You know, the whiff of wonder and alliteration as well. But it just sort of comes out, and the collective paw imagery sort of reminds me one of my favorite poems of yours, and there's a YouTube video you did for this TEDx thing was with about the plastics, right? The plastics, um, where you embody, you personify the ocean and plastic bottles as well, which is really incredible. So we've talked about this, how there's this almost kind of a synesthetic quality to your work, where you seem to be getting the direct feed from not just nature as we ordinarily, I guess, think of it, like nature as being sort of greenery or organic, but also you're just as compassionate in a way to the plastics, and you embody and personify the ocean as a kind mother in a sense. And it just I was thinking of like Ernest Hemingway, right, in Old Man and the Sea, right? He talks about the what is it, the the ocean as what's that, what is the Spanish word for it? Madre, right? Madre, right. And this gets into kind of concepts like Gaia, like the Gaia principle, like the Earth Mother, the Earth Goddess, the cosmic consciousness of every single, not just species, which is something I think we need to really get beyond speciesism, but also the distinction between organic and inorganic matter. Plastics, microplastics are a big problem. And Ellyn, could you talk a little bit about how you got involved with that, with the TEDx venture and the plastics initiative?
yeah, I was asked to read a poem there by, Deanna Cohn asked me to read a poem, and she and Lisa Boyle, they're among co-founders of the Plastic Pollution Coalition. So there was an event, I think it was to think what year it was. It was some years back. It probably was around um to 12 or so, something like that, I think. And there was an event. They had and I wrote a poem called Ocean Song, which is, the poem you're mentioning, and read that there at the conference. Mhm.
No, when you, I mean, because I collective paw. I was literally looking at I have the Ellen maybe paper doll, on my wall. Um, I was just, um, I really am struck by how almost I'll sort of try to give you an image here. Like, and this is something that I felt a lot about not Gretchen, but Greta Thunberg. How when I first heard Greta Thunberg, it almost seemed like she was some sort of like nature sprite or some sort of wood sprite or something, like she was the voice of the trees or something like that. And, uh, and right, and I think of you as a kind of like this emanation almost from nature itself, like the collective power rises out and you can see it. You can see it like this ripple effect, almost like pushing through this fabric of our ordinary reality. Our ordinary reality, in our ordinary reality, we're divided up. And this is something that the theorist Donna J. Haraway, who created, it's called cyborg theory, which get into some Donna J. Haraway, right? She's amazing, right? Eco-feminist and also like cyber feminist as well. So I used her a lot in my thesis. So I see this as we're on the tipping point of sort of like of a cosmic consciousness, where we're aware that we're certainly not the only species, but species, beings, or organic things are not the only inhabitants of the earth. And if you get into people like who is that philosopher? Um, was it Wittgenstein? I think it was may have been Alfred North Whitehead. In his book, Alfred North Whitehead talked about, this sort of like this idea that everything has consciousness, which is really not original to him. Um, but and also this is something that, Carl Jung talked about. And I think that collectively there's a sort of upgrade of human consciousness that's happening that I started to feel back in the turn of the century. Like I started to feel that there's something going on. We were all almost like we were all receiving the same signal. And this is something that's happening. I'll later on, I'll tell you a little bit more about like the projects that we're doing that involve our friend Billy Martin, aka Poppy Z Bright. But I'll just give you one example of the sort of a synchronicity that happened. Billy Martin, Poppy Z Bright, um, who was a multiple contributor to our anthologies and a sort of a central figure in transgressive fiction, was stopped writing for I don't know how many years, like 15 years or so. And he began writing last year again after this long, you know, hiatus, because of two people, Christopher R. Golden and Brian Keene, and Stephen King. So um, Stephen King, of course, famously wrote The Stand, right, which is about an apocalyptic plague event where a whole bunch of people, much like the novel Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, have collective dreams, right? And they start to see these visions of the apocalypse. And then they there's the walking man who's the sort of Lucifer figure. There's this apocalyptic plague event called Captain Trips, right? Which was the subject of a song by the band Anthrax, who I happen to love. And so he wrote this book called The Stand. A lot of Stephen King's books are prophetical. And so this new book, this anthology, which I believe came out last year, it's called The End of the World as We Know It, um, which is a line from the REM song, right? Um, new tales of Stephen King's The Stand. And Poppy, Billy Martin, contributed the story, um, um, something in human when human voices wake us and we drown, which is, of course, from T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, right? Or it's not The Wasteland. It's I'm sorry, it's Prufrock, right? Prufrock. So talking about poetry, right? So again, and then at any rate, we'll cycle around back to Billy Martin. But I just think that we're having some sort of cosmic consciousness tipping point, and I know several of you, I think Ossiana, was agreeing with me. Um, so Ossiana, could you? I mean, what are your thoughts?
So I've started to notice a lot of very interesting patterns in my life, which I can't quite explain otherwise.
Yeah.
When I was in college, I was the oddball. Sorry, my cat was starting to cry, so she has to get cuddled by mom. Um, and now she can join her brothers on the bed. Go ahead. Sorry. But a lot of the things which I thought were completely normal and it didn't make sense to me that there was so much stigma behind them, such as being LGBT, being polyamorous, preferring to not live in a capitalist dystopia. Things like that were like, I was kind of like ripped to shreds by my classmates for it, especially when it came to things like sexuality, free love, having like a active sex life as a woman, like that kind of stuff. I was not entirely out of the closet at that point.
Yeah.
Like that stuff would get you ripped to shreds. And like perhaps maybe 5 years, because like I dropped out of college in 2010, 2011. About 5 years after, I started hearing more and more people literally repeating the same thoughts about, hey, this, why are we stigmatizing this? Why isn't this allowed? Why aren't we questioning this old vanguard? And now we're starting to see it swing back, almost like what psychologists call it an extinction burst, which is
Interesting.
abusers realize that somebody's saying no, they fight back 10 times harder,
Right.
not realizing that the tide has already turned.
That makes tons of sense.
So I've started to notice, and I mean, I'm not sure if you can tell, but I am pagan. I have an Ankh, and I also
Yay.
have a rune in my name because, and Jade because I had dreams about a Chinese god actually. Um,
Oh, cool.
I joined like a lot of psychic circles, and they've all mentioned the same thing, that there is like an inflection point going on where there's a lot of people trying to cling to the old vanguard of power because it was advantageous for them, at least on the surface.
Right.
So I think that right now what we're seeing is we're kind of seeing almost like a karmic reset and a major period of adjustment
Yeah.
because the forces
Collective
that we're up
pause.
against, exactly, the forces that we're up against, fascism. Now, if I'm going to guess here that everybody in this chat is probably as much of a history buff as I am, if not more
Yay.
so.
History.
Maybe, maybe, maybe.
Yep.
Definitely Ellen, maybe. I have a feeling about you, lady. Um, so,
Maybe.
like, you know, when you study history, you notice something. When you have a certain point of wealth inequality and when you have a certain point of dictatorship, tyranny and fascism is always self-consuming. It is never sustainable. What we're seeing right now is literally like the reign of Nicolae Ceausescu, to use my own heritage,
Right.
in fast forward, except like instead of like a dictator like Nicolae Ceausescu who was intelligent, we have something along the lines of an orange rabid chimpanzee covered in spray tan. So yeah,
Oh my
I
God.
like I realize that there is a lot at stake here. There's a very real possibility that America could collapse. But at the same time, I also feel like when it does, a lot of people are going to wake up to what they did. Because there's going to be a point where the people who voted for him can no longer push their hatred, their blame of everything going wrong in their life on minorities or Democrats or whatever was fed to them by mainstream media.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents on the
I
inflection
love
point.
that. Pickles, could you talk to that? The whole idea of like a shift in consciousness, because we've been talking about that for a long time. Oh,
Pickles?
Pickles, could you unmute yourself or I can't hear you. Um,
Uh, uh, Pickles, we can't hear you.
Alea, I can't hear you. Yeah, She's been having some technical problems. Okay, so I think I'll go to Vanessa now, and we'll swing back to Alea, and then Vanessa. So you approached me after Ellyn maybe initiated this concept of doing a charity anthology to help out with the wildfire relief because of the devastating wildfires. And now, it's sort of like I think I was talking with Ossiana recently about how it just seems like everybody's forgotten about the wildfires, and it was just yesterday. Um, and so you wanted to make a documentary film with me. So what did you have in mind about, what was your concept for Burning Hearts?
Well, can I go back and just say I'm in New York, and I agree
Yeah.
that, there are some people who are still talking about the fires, but the problem is with climate change, and that's one of my main areas of interest.
Yes.
It's that we can't keep up with it anymore. You know what I mean? We just can't keep up with what is going on, the number
Yeah.
of issues all the time, and everybody has their pet peeve. Excuse me. Everyone has their major concerns that they continue to be philanthropic or supportive of or whatever, and make things about and do things about and be active
Yeah.
through and then on top of that, you have all these disasters happening, just rolling through, and we have violence and gun violence and all these different things that all of a sudden in the paper that day there's something else that takes you. So I think that for me, I really am interested in the things that all of you have been saying, but I really believe that we have to believe that we can make a difference through film. I think through film and different things, we have to always have an idea or an action in mind. Like I, for example, write a lot of poetry and write a lot of things that are about, like something I've read in the paper that morning or something that's actually going on. And that idea of ping, it's that something keeps kind of grabbing at your hem or kind of like, like tapping you, and all of a sudden you say, you just got to write it. You write a word, come back to it later, get something going, and make something happen and collaborate with people. The other day there was a bake sale, and I happened to know the woman, and I happened to be going to a party to watch the Super Bowl, and I said, let's get together and do some other things about this. We're doing stuff with, I'm part of a mental health. I'm one of the co-founders of a mental health program here. We've done about 55 mental health projects, and we're doing something on menopause
Nice.
and mental health, which is really important. But the fires, I think the idea of doing something and doing it relatively soon because people do forget.
Yes.
And again, I just want to emphasize that whole idea of having an action. What do you want people to do? Because frankly, like for me, if I'm writing about love or a past love, or I'm writing about my room, or I'm
Yeah.
writing about blue or whatever, nobody has to do anything about it. But if I'm
Yeah.
writing about like some gang who put a gun in some kid's diaper and they died because it went off, that's something that there is something to do about that. There's
Right.
something to get people to think about. And I think we're in just like Ossiana and Ellyn have already said, and I know Ellyn feels this way. I mean, excuse me, I know Alexis feels this way. We, we are in a really uh, we're in a dire, very scary place. And at the same time, we have to keep going because they're
Yeah.
talking about not being overwhelmed and not like just stopping and saying, I can't do anything about it. I'm having drinks in a couple nights with my friends who are all Republicans.
Yeah.
And I agree with you about saying if you voted sorry, do you mind that I'm talking a little bit? When Trump was first elected 8 years ago, I went out with a friend, a couple of friends, and one of them has now died. Went out with a couple of friends. It was 3 days after the election, and I still am friends with people because I think we have to talk with people we don't agree with. If Democrats and people who don't like Trump never talk about anybody or anything, nothing's going to change. I think. So I went out with these people and I said to them that night, I said, I hope that the reasons, I'm sure you're positive about him, but I hope the reasons you voted for him, I hope they end up coming true. What we're seeing now is so much, absolutely so much more awful and fast and efficient, brilliant marketing, brilliant. And if he can get all these things done, the one thing I want to say, I want to do something about USAID because my husband worked for USAID. Nobody knows what USAID is. Half these people have never been to India. They've never been to Nepal. They've never seen a kid about to starve. These people are all just sitting in, restaurants talking about this stuff as if they know. My friends, I must say, I'm one of the reasons I'm married. I've been married for 32 years to a really good guy. And I respect him and I admire him and his values are important. And I'm feeling that what is going to happen with my friends, for example, I'm seeing on Wednesday night. I haven't seen them since this all happened. And I'm going to say to them, I got to tell you, my friendships and my love and the people I work with, it's because I admire people and I appreciate their value system. And if I don't appreciate someone's value system, I probably can't be friends with them anymore. I can be cursory friends, but I can't get anything done. And this night, like Wednesday night, I've got to say to these women, I don't know what you're thinking about. I don't know if you're thinking about anything at all. If you're just thinking about taxes and your pocketbook, it's just simply not enough. It just isn't. It's so selfish. And it's a
Yeah,
time for people who they can afford to pay more. They can
right.
afford to do all kinds of things and pay
Exactly.
more. So anyway, so I'm sorry. I do think it's a time for activism. It's a time, for example, if we do a big poetry reading, we have three set for California. I'm coming out. We have three set in California,
Right.
and I wanted to actually put this out March 21st when we read it Beyond Baroque. Some of
Right.
you are part of this.
Right.
If you want to come and even not read, we have six readers. Alex is reading, Alexis, myself, and three other people. We can do interviews that day. I would like
Yeah.
to do in-depth interviews with people and actually get them to talk about what is going on for them right now,
Yeah.
how to move the needle, and that could basically be the launch point of a documentary, those baseline. And by
Right.
by the way, the main person to film, Alex, is you,
Okay.
but I'm going to ask you. You're not going to, you can ask stuff, but in other words, ask you questions
Right.
and get into the material that's in your head. And maybe
Sure.
Ellyn, if you're coming, and Ossiana, I can't remember, Ossiana or Pickles couldn't come. Somebody's not.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm from Jersey, so if you just
Same
want me
thing.
to hop over the bridge, I can.
Yeah, that'd be great. Anyway, but I think we're in super important times. Super.
Can I don't
Agreed.
think I can be there in person, but maybe over Zoom or something. If I
Sure.
don't know if you can talk like that, that would be great.
Right. Exactly.
Well,
Well,
we could definitely interview you over
yeah,
Zoom.
exactly.
I don't know about like we could read something of yours at Beyond Baroque for
Yes.
you if, and
Brilliant
Oceana the
idea.
same thing.
Brilliant idea. Yeah.
Oceana the same thing. But for interviews at this point, because we're past COVID, if we
Right.
can not do Zoom interviews, it's better if we can do it.
So
And
I've invited a couple of people who I'm like almost positive they're going to show up. And so my friend James Bickell, who's incredible poet, and he's one of the people that I invited to come out to Beyond Baroque this last time. He was more than a decade ago, and so he's a very nice man. And I think Dale Smith. Dale Smith is this incredibly charming, incredibly gay black man, is a dear friend of mine, and and I think I asked him to come out and this last time to read with me, and he was reading his. At first, he was a little nervous. He was a little like formal and stuff, and we had our Ellyn. Who is that woman Kali V Kali, that poet
Oh, Big Holly. Uh-huh.
V Kali. So V Kali was saying, okay, and pretty soon. Dale lightened up and he got saucy. I mean, he got saucy, and he was representing. So that was a beautiful thing. And so Dale Smith hopefully can come out to another friend of ours named John Palisano, who's a Bram Stoker award-winning um, f actually, he's a screenwriter for Ridley Scott, and we just had him on the show last week, and he's also a Bram Stoker award-winning author, and he's part of this band with Heather Graham and some other actors. So I believe he's going to try to come out at least. So and but just this and Oceana was telling me that some of our other that we're getting some major press actually opportunities. Oceana, um,
So, I do a little bit of like PR, kind of like as a hobby, but also like occasionally like paid. And I occasionally like will peruse quoted and I'll see like what people are looking for. And one of the things that just popped into my email today was one of the top representatives of quoted, and they're like, "Are you interested in running the story? And also, do you have any stories that you want press for? Because we can make it by the due date." So I'm like, "Well, story and a half for you." So we're going to be reaching back out probably tonight.
excellent, excellent. So then I want to hop over to Alexis because I know Alexis has been researching and you're very, very patient. Thank you, Alexis. um, these questions that I presented to you, ahead of time, and so this question is about your your films, um, and particularly um, this focuses on your film. It's called What Memphis Needs, and so the question is, so your work, your films span 5 decades. They explore themes of politics, identity, and consciousness. Your work, What Memphis Needs, provides what's been called an eviscerating cross-examination of Memphis history and society. How do you see the evolution of political poetry in the age of digital media, and what lessons have you learned about crafting artistic resistance across different technological epochs, if that makes any sense?
Okay, I'm just trying to see artistic resistance. Just one second.
Sure.
I don't know which one that is. Okay, well, let me just start by saying that media is media. I mean, whether it's digital or otherwise. I mean, even if it's old Italian, I mean, a revolution insofar as most poets in the Middle Ages uh, wrote in Latin, and Dante Alighieri described political despots getting their just desserts in hell in the Divine Comedy in
Yeah.
Italian.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's media, but so is lead lights in some contemporary or future protest poetry poster. It's all media. Well, I never saw the political poem Assassination Raga, but maybe some of you have. It's a poetry film by Lawrence Ferlinghetti that aired on the Smothers Brothers
Oh,
TV show
wow.
back in 1968. And the evolution of the poetry film here in the US got a huge boost in the 1970s because of Herman Berlantz having organized an annual poetry film festival at the Fort Mason Center in San Francisco. Now there are hundreds of poetry film festivals. Just go to Film Freeway. I mean, they're showing contemporary, digitally produced political poetry films throughout the world, whether it's the UK, France, Germany, or Sikkim, Ukraine. And most recently, I've heard of a movement called, um, maybe you've heard of this, Alex. I haven't. I've just barely heard of it just this week. Solar punkification,
Oh, solar
organized
punk. Yeah, solar punk. Yeah.
or organized in the Bay Area by Bobby Fishkin and Jesse Elliott, and it, quote, envisions a world where technology and nature harmoniously coexist and where human
I love it.
ingenuity creates a brighter, more inclusive future for all, dot, 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 in
Right.
which an interdisciplinary diversity and a narrow diversity of people act in radical collaboration,
I
which I
love it.
suspect we're doing a little of today.
Yeah,
And that website is
I love
www.solarpunkification.org.
it.
And there's also the poetry of Joanna Furman, who just read it Beyond Baroque, whose book I haven't read yet, but it's called Data Mind, and
Oh my God.
it includes poems like, quote, "We'll burn their algorithms when we get
I
to it."
love it. I love it. That leads directly to, I know that Ossiana has been champing at the bit, waiting for me to talk about one of my here, somebody who's not only one of my personal heroes, and I know for Ossiana is fangirling over there. Um,
I'm
okay,
totally
so
not
we're going to talk
fangirling. I'm
about
cool.
John
Like,
Shirley.
cool.
There's the two people who have been instrumental in my career, and one of them is here with us today, Ellyn maybe. The other person is John Shirley. For those of you who don't know who John Shirley is, my viewers out there, what have you been hiding under a rock for the last 40 years? I would say, if you've never heard of John Shirley, you probably have seen a film called
The Crow.
A Crow, right? Starring Brandon Lee. It's directed by Alex Proyas, who also made Dark City. There's a new one which is crap. Let's not even talk about that one. Um, it was co-written by a guy named David J. Scow, who was also the creator of a genre called splatterpunk, and also wrote the original film, Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my connection with Scow in a second. But oh, remind me to talk about Craig Spector, because I need to talk about Craig Spector a little bit. But so John Shirley and is created, actually, he was an old school punk rocker. And so back in the day, I mean, he was a punk rock guy. Had admittedly some substance issues, which he which are the subject of his book called Wet Bones. Now, I have a copy here of Wet Bones, which is inscribed to me by John Shirley, um, and for Alex Johnson, John Shirley, and it has a map of. This is fucking amazing. It has a map of LA and all these places that are now consumed by fire, and that's Shiva,
Wow.
right? This is the cover,
That's prophetic.
right? This is the cover. Yes, he's extremely prophetic, of Wet Bones, and it's you see a pentacle, right? And this is um, some of the things that people have said about him. Some of the people that have, you know, had good things to say, um, like Nancy Collins. Nancy Collins said, Shirley writes like a high octane mixture of Ballard, William S. Burroughs, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and William Kotzwinkle, yet emerges with a cranked up paranoid style that is definitely his own. Nancy A. Collins. A dream of a writer, Ramsey Campbell. Um, Clive Barker has won legions of fans with his dark imagination, but John Shirley was there first, and he's there now, beyond all limits except for whatever it is that defines excellence. His fiction packs such force, it's a wonder, it's legal. Locus. And so, and then, okay, so you see the inscription. Um, right. So back in the day, 2012, when at the, when because of, primarily because of Ellyn maybe, um, I, I, I developed and also with the help of Richard Modiano and S.A. Griffin, um, I I I created, the Death Jazz, and published it myself. And so what Shirley said about this book was Alexis Johnson's poetry is edging towards a new kind of hybrid multi-genre noir sci-fi surrealism. Go over the edge with him. And then Alex Johnson's Death Jazz collection is truly beautiful, full of vivid imagery and deep emotion. Ellyn Maybe, LA poet and national treasure. I should say international treasure, really, world treasure, cosmic treasure. And when when I wrote the book The Flowers of Doom, which came out last year, and it is published, it's going to be translated into French by our friend Seb Dubinsky, who is a friend of Michael Moorcock, who wrote the introduction to his last novel. Um, and we had him on the show as well. You know, Pickles and I had him on the show. I'm sorry, Pickles, we can't hear you. I love you so much, okay? I love you. Squeezy hugs. So, um, anyway, so I said, hey, John Shirley, my man, um, well, he's actually extremely intimidating. I mean, he's like a god, you know. And I knew Lemmy, so you know, I know from experience, right? So I reached out to him by email. I said, um, hey, would you take a look at my new book? And he said, okay. And like I forget how many days it took, but check this out. When I, oh my gosh, when I looked at this email, I had to, I every time I look at this email, I have to sort of let go, and I have to have other people witness it. And in his blurb begins, Alexis Johnson is the Baudelaire of our time, semicolon, the poet of the underground. Okay, so that is an incredibly powerful endorsement from the man who co-created cyberpunk. And what I get from Shirley is that he is part of our collective paw program because he, especially with the original story that he wrote for the Black Sabbath tribute, which is called Lonely is the Word, and it's inspired by the song from the 1980 Heaven and Hell album by Black Sabbath. It was the first album that Ronnie James Dio came on board with. And, you know, I invite all of you to contribute to the Sabbath book as well. Alea is going to be writing the foreword, huge fan of Black Sabbath, I think. And the the story then the book is coming out in on March 1st, and all proceeds are going to Children of the Night Incorporated, which combats sex trafficking of children. And trigger warning. Okay, I'm not going to talk about that. Um, but what I am going to say is this story is very much about what we've all been talking about. It's about course correcting our our race towards disaster. This is something that Shirley had been talking about back in the 80s when he did the the trilogy of the so-called cyberpunk trilogy, as well as influencing his friend William Gibson, saying, "Hey, William Gibson, you know what? You're a pretty smart guy. You should write science fiction." And we know what happened then, right? William Gibson, and I have actually, this is really, really cool. I have a signed copy of Neuromancer, um, as well as signed copies of Ghost World and the graphic novel and the film from Daniel Close, right? So because of those, we went to the LA Book Fair. So and Gibson was there and a bunch of guys, even Larry the hustler guy, whatever that guy was there, who was
Larry
kind of
Flint.
interesting. Yeah, Larry Flint was there. You know, he was kind of interesting. So, what does all this have to do with John Shirley? Incredibly profound connection. The Matrix. The Matrix. So, Cyberpunk began John Shirley was a kind of a punk rock guy, sort of like our friend Carrie Lee Crump. We'll talk a little bit about Carrie Lee Crump because I kind of have to, and we're getting towards that, you know, that marker where about 15 minutes to go. I could go on a little bit longer. I don't know about the rest of you, but there's so much information that really people need. And I know that, we're all extremely busy, impacted schedules. So we might as well just go on a little bit longer, if that's okay, maybe 20 minutes longer, just to get some of this information out because it's really, really profound. The struggle of the resistance movement. Um, the Matrix would not exist without John Shirley. It would not exist without William Gibson. William Gibson was literally the man who coined the term cyberspace. And the idea that we could use technology, which seems oppressive, it seems dystopian, it seems like it belongs to the enemy, we can take back the power, or take the power back, in the words of Rage Against the Machine. Rage Against the Machine were my neighbors when I was living in South Pasadena, and they did benefit shows for this thing called this Arroyo Bookstore, or the Royal Bookstore, for people who don't live in LA or haven't, you know, visited LA. The Arroyo Seco is this sort of like this, it's like this what you might call it. It's this kind of artificial basin that was created, I believe, back in the 1950s at the dawn of the interstate um, freeways, or highways, actually. Sorry. So I don't drive, so I don't know about cars. Um, but and portions of that of the movie Terminator 2 were filmed at in the Arroyo Seco area, and one of our collaborators, or contributors to our book, Iron Fist: A Literary Tribute to Motorhead, is a guy named Matt Sorum, and his band, Guns N' Roses. You know, their one of their songs was in the film Terminator 2. So everything connects, and or you could say everything is broken, right? That's a song by Bob Dylan, which actually everything is broken, right? Which I know that Ellen Mabey is a huge Bob Dylan fan, aren't we all? And that is also the title, not coincidentally, of a book by John Shirley. Eco-consciousness is the name of the game, but using a kind of a military mindset, like, in the words of, again, Rage Against the Machine, with the thoughts from a militant mind. You know, um, what is it? Hard line after hard line, right? I've Rage are a huge inspiration. They were primary to the um, the Occupy movement, right? They occupied Wall Street, literally occupied Wall Street, right? They didn't just say we're going to do some shit. They they entered the exchange, and then they performed on the stock exchange. Now that's hardcore, man. And I think what we could do is what is one of our contributors and a good friend of mine, his name is Greg Tomani. We've had him on the show multiple times. He's a guy who is one of the world's leading philosophers and artist, poet, whatever. His work has been, endorsed and righteously blurred by people like, Gayatri Spivak, of Columbia University, and his MA thesis was, the foreword was written by Dr. Cornel West. So I'm hoping that we can involve Dr. West in this venture, because he's a very, very important guy, and he was also in the Matrix himself. Um, the theme of the Matrix is using technology, which again can be used, and we've certainly seen it very oppressively, against itself. And I think, you know, Michel Foucault, the French philosopher and sociologist, um, his concept, which he was very, very much inspired, and he acknowledged the influence of William S. Burroughs, um, that you know his insight, his major insight was that power is not simply top down, you know, it can be bottom up and it can also be everything. It can be that power is nodes, nodes that travel along lines of discourse. And we can have positive, it doesn't matter. Power is power is power is power. I think that was sort of when he debated Noam Chomsky, and Noam Chomsky came off as a little sort of naive in that also sort of interesting about that debate between Noam Chomsky and uh, and Michel Foucault, where Michel Foucault, he was paid in a chunk of hashish, which he called the Chomsky hash. Okay.
Huh.
Um, the whole vision of the whole world as seen from outer space, this guy named Stuart Brand, right? He created the Whole Earth Catalog. Now, my dad, Stephen M. Johnson, was a major contributor to the Whole Earth Catalog, and except for when the Beat took it over for the Journal for the Protection of All Beings. And, my dad protested and he wrote a 6-page letter to the editor, which was all art, which was published in the Coalition Quarterly. And it's like, whatever happened to, why don't we, what is this nonsense with people like, Gary Snyder, Gregory Corso, I don't know, Stuart Brand or whatever, all talking about, the, beat stuff. Um, and my dad is a very important guy. When he took me to see Allen Ginsberg speak at the Whole Earth Festival in Sausalito in 1980 when I was 14 years old. And it's the first time I'd ever seen, well, I'd read Ginsberg, but I saw Ginsberg read Plutonian Ode. He, that was the first time that he'd read Plutonian Ode, and I was a foot away from the stage. And he also introduced me to R. Crumb. What does this have to do with anything? Earth from space. Earth from space. The fourth, and also this has a transgender component. Earth from space, which was a vision that Stuart Brand had. He was on a train and he had a big chunk of hashish, and he took the hashish and it was like far fucking out. He was looking at this photo that NASA had just released of the Earth from space, and it was like, damn, Skippy, I have to do something about it. He created the Whole Earth Catalog, access to tools. And the last Whole Earth Catalog was the family on the back was our friends and Pickles. I'm really, really sorry about Pickles. Um, the family on the back was the family of our friend um, Lazaro Firefox, Ellyn, who is the author of Sexy Witch. And the forthcoming, you mentioned menopause, forthcoming book, which I blurbed, Gender Queer Menopause, right? So a warm shout out to Lazaro Firefox, Ellyn. They have contributed, and I'm going to ask them to contribute to Burning Hearts. They have contributed to my book, Like a Tribute, a literary homage to Madonna. And I'm hoping that because we're all, I don't know, I am a huge fan of Madonna. Madonna is a huge inspiration. I hope that you can all participate in my Madonna book. So um, just because I know we're sort of running out of time here, um, and so I would like to go back to Ellyn maybe. Ellyn, and I'm just bringing up my question here. Ellyn, you've spoken about how subtlety in poetry can be appreciated when addressing social issues. How do you balance the need for clear political message with the, I'm not sure that's badly phrased, that I'm not sure there is a need for clear political message. In fact, I think that a that politics and explicit politics is, you know, the ruination of poetry and against the poetic impulse at all. That's where you get things like Ezra Pound. But that was a bad question. But um, how do you balance, the need for a sort of a political sort of, I guess, response or a ping back, right, with the nuances of poetic expression, which far transcend any temporal politics. And then this is a question I'm really curious about, Ellyn. What role does humor play in your approach to serious social themes?
Yeah, yeah. With the a lot of times the humor, a lot of things mix together in the work. The humor seems to come in a lot of references to music because I love all the art forms too. All the different art forms seem to come into the work. So it's sort of this whole kind of hodgepodge of different things that
Mhm.
inspire the work. So it doesn't, it kind of has all these different things. So um how do I say that just seems to happen. I mean, and the work has to have has these blends, I mean, of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it generally has that, so it kind of has different things happening at once, maybe. So that's the balance, I guess. Or I mean, but I mean, yeah. Oh boy.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I really love your performances. I know I'm so whenever I feel down, I'll watch something like some of your things you did, some of your videos, and like and so you're very physical performer. I mean, you like to just sort of like boogie and rock out with when you're performing, and you're also you're a songwriter among other things. Do the songs, this kind of the song structure, because songs well, they're hybrids, really, right? Like City Streets, something like that, City Streets, and then that the refrain in Picasso, for example, you know, I just like face-to-face conversations. Do, do, do. Did that evolve as a collaboration with Ellen Maybe Band, or how did that come about?
Yeah, yeah, that did. Somebody in the band, several people in the band as songwriters would come sometimes up with the choruses and stuff
Uh-huh.
and sing that, and so in that way, sometimes that would form from the songs. And then another project I did with music as well called Ellen and Robbie with the
Mhm.
songwriter that was also in the band as well. Like he would start playing improvising music and I would just start writing as it went along, and that would be another way the music would come and stuff. I mean the words would come along with the music with that. Yeah. And one time actually in the Ellen and Robbie project, I just suddenly had like a melody and lyrics come to me like it would be sung, and I just said, hey, that this happened this way. So
Yeah,
things always can be kind of different ways sometimes, and it just digs back. Yeah.
I love especially, and this is something my dad and I would go to Pete's Coffee in Torrance, and we would just like spend literally hours like reading your stuff and going. I remember and laughing out loud like your line in Picasso, um, 1 calorie away from suicide, just was incredibly like it's just even if you're whatever gender or it's still I think we can all relate to that, and it's funny. It's a really funny line. And it sort of reminds me, that poem reminds me of this, like, have you ever heard of Stendhal syndrome?
Oh yeah, I get that sometimes.
right? And
Like
I
the
think
rapid heartbeat, like you almost feel dizzy, overwhelmed. It's like,
exactly. And it was a movie, it was the title of a movie by Dario Argento called, it was the Dario Argento. It was a sort of a mystery thriller. It was not bad for later Dario, was starring Ozzy Argento, who cannot act to save her life, but it's okay. She's okay. I think because she's dubbed in English, we get a completely different Ozzy, she sounds everybody sounds artificial in Dario Argento films. I don't know if that's intentional or if it's just you know, like a because of the way that they overdub everything. Um, but so yeah, so the Stendhal syndrome. And Ellen, when you talk about like the sort of immersive experience with Picasso's, woman sitting on a rock, where we say that the colors are wet, the colors are wet. How did that come about? So did you like obviously you saw this painting. Did you have that you had this experience right in front of Picasso's painting?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. When I saw it, the words just came to me, I mean, the whole poem just sort of happened. Yeah, yeah.
Um, like
Mhm.
like me, I think that you're shy, but when you're performing, you're absolutely riveting. Like what happens between those states? Like between being a shy person who giggles a lot, you still giggle, which is delightful. But then and there's that photo you have of you at Beyond Baroque, and you're standing central with all these people behind you, and you're just like, there's this central presence. What happens? How do you overcome the shyness when you're performing?
Mm. It's just feel like myself, and if I feel shy or if I'm more quiet, but I don't know, it just seems to, um, wow, well, I never thought I would ever perform. I mean, before I read poetry, I wanted hopefully people might read my work because people seem to be enthusiastic. I thought,
Yeah.
well, maybe they'll read it because I'm not sure. That's how I got my name. Maybe I'll read because I just would always sign up that way. So it wasn't a given at all that I would ever read. So I'm grateful. And even like with the music, sometimes it would end up in singing, in a surreal way. So it's all kind of magical to me. I'm grateful. I'm actually just so grateful that, I was able to be able to do that. That I'm totally grateful.
I
Yeah.
believe there was an Exene Cervenka solo album that came out around 2012 that's called that has refers directly to you, and the title is something like The Difference of Maybe. I think. Do you know that? Somebody Google that. Um, because I mean, so yeah, and Exene like actually, did you tell us about how the cowardice of amnesia came about? Because it's incredible. It was published by Henry Rollins. It was edited by Exene Cervenkova, and the cover photographs and artwork were by Viggo Mortensen. How did that book come about?
Well, um, Exene really was enthusiastic about my work, and she's just said, I'd like to present your work to Henry Rollins and see what he says about, she said that it wasn't generally something she did, really, it wasn't something she did, but she felt strongly to want to do that. And he really liked my poem Fido,
I
a
love that
dog.
poem. Yeah.
And he was also enthusiastic. So, it's so wild. A lot of times I've fallen into different things that have happened, just things sort of sometimes happen. Like,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I didn't know I'd be going to film school in Prague, but I
Right.
love film. or I
Right.
didn't know I'd end up in that movie, and all of a sudden I have been part of, SAG after all these
Exactly.
years now. So it's interesting. Sometimes it's just serendipitous things. I mean, yeah, but I think it's been neat. I'm grateful that I started to read because it I mean you just never know. I mean yeah, and I appreciate that people have been warm, encouraging. Yeah.
Right. Well, you have certainly been very, very warm and encouraging to me, and I'm profoundly respectful of you and grateful to you for your, I mean, you and a handful of other people, I think you and John Shirley have been instrumental in my career, and I couldn't have done it without you. I mean, I'm sure that if had we but world enough and time, you know, to quote Andrew Marvell, that um, this coyness, this coyness lady were no crime, right? Um, um, but
Sorry about the cats. I'm
there's
not
no
sure if you can hear
worries.
them
There's no worries.
sulking. Yeah.
But I mean, it just would not have happened that way. And then Emily Frank and Richard Modiano, and I have to just give shout outs to the people who have been part of, you know, um, helping to make Nocturne Books, what it is. I mean, and I think that I just want to, um, wind things up with, I'll do one last round, but I really, I want to take care of some business, and some of that business is shout outs. Okay, so I want to give a warm shout out to John Shirley, to Mark Olmsted, to Nelson Gary, to Larry Jaffe, to Joe Kidd, um, to Deborah Tilson Code of the National Beat Poetry Association Incorporated, to Chrissa Velisario, who's the National Beat Poet Laureate of Greece, to K.R. Morrison, to Marie Lecrevan, I'm going to forget well, to V. Vale, of Research Publications, to Nelson Gary, to our good friend Caitlin R. Kiernan, to Billy Martin, aka Poppy Z. Bright, um, down in New Orleans, and really we're all reeling. Carrie Lee Chrome, our dear friend, who's also reeling, from the what she called the Tease Blitzkrieg. Jerbo, the who's an amazing person, and I've known for about since the early 2000s, and then our good friend who we've had on the show more recently, Tara Van Flower from the band Lycia, and who else? There's so many names. Greg Tomini, Lyric Rivera, aka Neurodivergent Rebel, Michael Duckwall, um, our good friend Ron Whitehead, who provided the William S. Burroughs interview from 1996, and also his poem, which is a love poem to William, which is called "Calling the Toads." Um, and there's so many more. L.L. Soares is a Bram Stoker award-winning author. One of the distinct, uh, one of the really, really interesting and pioneering things that we've done almost accidentally with Nocturnicorn Books is we have mostly original work by some of the greatest cultural forces of our time. I mean, V. Vale, he created industrial culture. Okay, so Jeremy Reed, poet. He's the poet laureate of England, and he's the guy who wrote. He's a friend, and he's the guy who wrote the foreword um, this book called Who Killed Mr. Moonlight, which I actually played this to Ellyn, and this inspired Ellen's Bauhaus poem. And Who Killed Mr. Moonlight, Black Magic, Benediction, and Bauhaus, and which was by our friend David J. Haskins, who was a founder member of Bauhaus and Love and Rockets, and best known for, among other things, writing the song Bela Lugosi's Dead. Um, and the whole Dear Bela crew, Emily Frank, Richard Modiano, Nelson Gary, repeating myself, Mark Olmsted, who made the film um, Burroughs on Bowery, and he is in Burning Hearts. He's in the Bauhaus book, and he's also in the Burroughs book because of all the connections between all these people. And more recently, Catfish McDarris, Alexis Roan Fancher, I'm collaborating with Catfish on a number of different things. Um, Chad Holm, um, David, God, he was recommended to me. Chad Holm was actually a friend of good friend of Ron Whitehead, and he knows Wendell Berry, and we had him on the show just last week. And I'm trying to get a hold of Wendell Berry. If any of you know how I can get a hold of Wendell Berry, um, Chad is also a friend of Ralph Steadman, and he owns one of the original drawings from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, if you can believe that. I mean, the guy is I guess he and Ron, you know, well, he was also in attendance at that spectacular um, event where, Ron Whitehead and Johnny Depp welcomed Hunter S. Thompson back to Louisville, right? And there was a bit of an altercation and a struggle behind the scenes, and things went wacky when Hunter demanded that everybody, pile into his car and they go and buy leather goods. And I asked Chad, I said, "Is this a kinky thing?" He said, "Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes, definitely." Well, it's Hunter, right? So, and there's probably about Aram Saroyan, right? Aram Saroyan. There's shout out to Aram Saroyan, John Palisano, and there's about 50 more. So we're so fortunate in the respect that we have many of these people are I who have personal relationships with. Some of I have close personal relationships with. Some people like Tara Van Flower I talk to all the time. So I'm beyond grateful. And so um, just one more thing before we do the round, and then we say goodbye. For this round, Ossiana and I have a major announcement. And Ossiana, could you tell the
Uh,
people this is it?
the my the my the
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
uh the words.
Your your
Uh,
book, E
yes.
minor, one of my favorite chords.
This is gonna be my first fiction book ever. Um, it's I talk about what it's about.
Yes.
It's basically watching a human trafficking survivor slowly go from getting a scholarship to a college to having her life fall apart and slowly slipping through the cracks, and you slowly see her trying to escape, trying to bond with sketchy people, but quickly becoming one of them. And it shows why people end up in those situations, the marginalization, the psychology behind it. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers it, right?
Right. So I will be publishing that through Nocturnicorn Books later much later in the year, around December. I'm also going to be publishing two novels by our friend Nelson Gary. And Nelson Gary is the one who hooked me up with Val Vale of research, and also with Matt Sorum of Guns N' Roses and the Cult and and Velvet Revolver, and at one point um, Motorhead, and so also um, I'm being called to lunch, so I'm going to have to wrap this up. Um, our friend um, Dr. Lois Lee of Children of the Night Incorporated, who is the official charity partner for um, Hand of Doom, a literary tribute to Black Sabbath. Also, Michael Suliban in the UK, who's the guy who created Emerald Sabbath. And then it blows my mind that I can actually say these words, but I'd like to give a shout out to Tony Iommi and Tony Martin and Bev Bevan of Black Sabbath, and who's, the Black Sabbath tribute is literally in the hands of Tony Iommi. Thanks to Michael, and just a couple of weeks ago requested a backup flash drive, for his backup flash drive, so that they'd have multiple copies of this book. And Alea's writing the forward, and we have um, a line of contributors, a lineup of contributors that is beyond belief. But most of them, if they're not people like famous musicians like Lucifer Fulci from the band Penis Flytrap. We're now currently on tour with Venom Incorporated. It's people like, again, John Shirley, Christy Nogle, who won the Bram Stoker Award for Beulah, um, Anna Taborska, who's also a contributor to Burning Hearts. And I would just want to mention a shout out to Anna Taborska, um, is a award-winning filmmaker in the UK, has worked with the BBC. She's made two documentaries with the BBC about World War II. It's an amazing human being. And she's also contributed an original poem to the Iron Fist, a literary tribute to Motorhead. And all of you are invited to participate in this. Motorhead has some really talk about social conscience. Just listen to their words, the lyrics. Just because you've got the power, that don't mean you got the right. Okay. Very, very socially conscious band. It wasn't just about, we are Motorhead, we're going to kick your ass. That was all show. I knew Lemmy. I could say he was a friend of mine, and he was a very kind man. He was a very decent man, and he was complete opposite of, he was gentle, he was the complete opposite of the legend. So, in memory of Lemmy Kilmister and Amelie Frank. I don't know if I mentioned Amelie Frank, right? Amelie Frank, who is writing the forward to my next book, The Flowers of Love, which was suggested by our friend Carla Fuller, who was the screenwriter, actress, and she was the widow of the late Samuel Fuller. So that was a suggestion. So shout out to Carla Fuller, right? And so we're publishing in the next couple of months. The first book out of the door, February 16th, White on White, a literary tribute to Bauhaus, officially endorsed with a blurb by David J. Haskins, and featuring a note from a fan by Ossiana, as well as work by John Palisano, we had just had on the show. Bram Stoker award-winning author, works with Ridley Scott. Oh, Paul M. Salmon. Did I mention Paul M. Salmon? Who's contributed an original story to the Hand of Doom. And he was embedded with Blade Runner. He was a close friend of Philip K. Dick. And he lost his house and his car in the wildfires. Shout out to Paul. And lovely man. brilliant man. And we have like so many. Jarbo is in the Bauhaus book. Carrie Lee Chrome is in the Bauhaus book. Ethan Maroulis with the band Spawn Ranch is in the book. Alea is in the book. Pickles is in the book, and about 40 more people. Also, Hazel Ann Lynch, who's our beautiful friend in the Caribbean, um, who's the creator of Senor Fluffy, is the French cat with the Spanish name, and he's also wrote called in honor of something like in honor of the Masters of Goth, which is a really powerful poem. And her friend, also in Trinidad and Tobago, Sodor Lucio, is a great grandmother, and who writes horror stories. And so we're going to be publishing those two and it's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful coming, it's a once in a lifetime kind of lightning strikes, 500 times how Nocturnicorn books, you know, came to be, but it started out, in 2015. And so, okay, enough of my blabbing. I had to do that, right? Because this is what we're all about. It's not just one thing. It's a hybrid, right? It's a hybrid. So we're a boutique literary imprint, but we're also filmmakers, but we're also songwriters, but we're also artists, but we're also everything. And we do humanitarian work, but we're here to make money because we're capitalists too. But it's sort of enlightened capitalism where nobody, no haters get through the door here. You can't be a hater and participate in Nocturnicorn books. And the assholes kind of self-select. So, the people who've pulled out are on the side of darkness. And I mean literally like the murder threats crew. Enough about them. Um, also, um, Christopher R. Gautier, who contributed New Year's Eve and the Ghost of Bela Lugosi to the Bauhaus book, and he's a Rondo Hatton Award-winning author, and I believe he's in Montreal, Canada. So, okay, so now I'm going to go back, I guess, Alexis, anything that you want to promote, what you're working on now, and any final thoughts?
Let's see. I, yeah, let me change my background. I think that would probably be appropriate for what I want to talk about.
Oh,
Beautiful.
Yeah, let's
Pickles,
see.
we can hear you now.
Okay, you can hear me?
No, I mean Pickles. We can hear Pickles.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so
Yay!
I'll try to be uh brief. Well, yeah, I'll try to be brief, but so that we can defer to Pickles because I've been looking forward to hearing from her for the last couple hours. But I just wanted to mention that I love digital software, insofar as that it has enabled me to see the rhythms, I'd like to say spiritual rhythms, in the nature that surrounds us. So I've been doing these photo collages, which is a dance that I do with digital software. And what's changed in my lifetime is the degree of awareness that landscape, when you ask the question, how do you see digital technologies changing the landscape of political poetry?
Yeah,
It's a question I was thinking about over the weekend, and thank you for sending it to me. But
sure.
what's changed in my lifetime is the degree of awareness that landscape is a concept that really has to be fought for, literally.
Yeah,
I mean, digital technologies are being used to fight for environmental issues on social media. But when you mention digital technologies changing the landscape, quote unquote, what also comes to mind are ruined lands and polluted waters and exploited people whose lives are damaged from the mining of lithium, for example, the lithium that goes into creating our computers and cell phones. Political poetry needs to address battles like the battles over lithium and other digital digital technology manufacturing, even if we're using digital technology to disseminate our words. And poetry is perfect for that because poetry is not just a black and white thing. It deals with ambiguity, ambivalence, shades of gray, and beyond, and the whole spectrum. So, anyway, that's what I wanted to mention
That's
while I had
that's
a
that's,
chance.
that's so
And
cool, and it's really kind of ties in with the subject of my book that Emily Frank is writing the forward to, The Flowers of Love, and which is kind of like I'm sort of conceptualizing that love is not necessarily all just light and chocolate and candies. It could get dark too, because you have the whole yin yang thing, But so thank you so much for that. Yeah.
oh, you're welcome. And I'm hoping to hear what Pickles has to say. If your audio is working,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
all ears.
Yeah, so why don't we circle around to the lovely and brilliant pickles?
Oh,
Oh, pickles?
No.
We,
well, we tried.
we tried. We
But I
tried.
don't even know if she's dill or sour or sweet or butter.
Oh, she's all these things. She's just um a sweet pickles. A sweet pickles. And so I guess so, Vanessa, any last thoughts, and where are we with the documentary, and I mean I could say that we have we're still accepting submissions for Burning Hearts every day, and I'm contacting people every day. So where are we with the documentary, and
Well,
which is tied in with the speaking
I
engagement?
put I put it into the chat. The
Okay.
day of the 21st, March 21st is the event at Beyond
Right.
Baroque
Yeah.
at 7:30. So
Right.
a great thing to do would be to have, and I would schedule them, or we could schedule them according to when someone could get there. But for example, they could be around Beyond Baroque or
Sure.
at Beyond Baroque because it's a good meeting place.
Yeah.
And basically maybe start around noon and go forward. And for example, I wrote notes for a couple people that you had mentioned. I mean, for example, I think the thing to do is to interview you first,
Okay.
Alex,
Okay.
and then interview Ellyn. I can't remember if you're going to be there
I
or
think I
not.
think she needs to be on
No,
Zoom separately.
But
yeah, I
that's right.
don't
You need to be on
think.
Zoom. Okay, so we don't need to do that day. I mean, if it is a Zoom. But Alexis, and you mentioned did you mention Diane or Gary, a couple of other people? For example, if there's time to do, I mean, really there's time to do like five
Yeah, yeah.
long
I
reviews
I
or
don't know if I don't know. I haven't. I need to explicitly reach out to Richard Modiano. Ellen,
right.
do you know if he's going to be at the Beyond Baroque thing or the reading?
Well, I don't know. I don't know, but yeah, definitely reach out to him.
Yeah,
Definitely, 'cause I'm not sure. I know that Quentin is there now. Quentin Ring is the artistic
yeah.
director there now. But I know that Richard gets to different things there. So I mean, yeah, definitely best to confirm with them.
And I can't
Yeah.
believe I forgot about Iris Berry.
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of my shout outs, Iris Berry, the who's I think of her as punk poetry royalty because of her poem in the Outlaw Bible of American Poetry, and she is the publisher of, see, somebody that I just got on board, Chad Holm, or not Chad Holm, but was it Denton, something Daniel Denton?
Oh, Dan
Dan Denton.
Denton,
Yeah, I
yeah.
just I just friended him on the recommendation of well, not Catfish McDarris, but we're mutual friends with Catfish, but from Chad Holm. Chad Holm had recommended that I talk to him, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, you published with Iris Berry, Small World, right?" And so, okay, so I don't know. Do you know what's going on with? I know that she's had some health issues. I would love to have her, um, at the reading, but
Well, you and
Um,
Vanessa might want to talk about the preparations separately.
Right, we could do that. Right,
Yeah.
yeah,
exactly.
I'm sorry,
Alex, I
Alexis.
was going to
You're
say
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you make a list,
I'll
yeah,
talk with
yeah, Alex,
Vanessa.
if you make a list
Sure.
of the people that you think could be there,
Yeah. Okay.
maybe. By the way, if there's 5 to 10 people, I mean, there could be a short interview rather
Right.
than a long interview.
Right.
And if we're set up one place, we can
Yeah.
move the camera around and make different setups and
Well,
everything.
I think definitely Emily Frank and Emily Frank, Nelson Gary, Richard Modiano, and Iris Berry, just if we have to do it separately, um, then we'll do it separately on Zoom. So I will email you with those names
Great.
and okay, my thoughts on that. Okay, great. So and Ellen, do you have any thing what are you working on now and anything you want to promote or
Well, I mean, I've been working on a dual project, a collaboration called Word Troubadours with PJ Swift
yeah,
um and you know what? It's exciting in the future. I don't know exactly what month, but Daniel Yerian he has a new series. Well, he said he signed from this called Sparring Artists, like different people that involved, and he's wants to publish our book.
that
That's
is so
Daniel Year's.
brilliant.
Yeah, he's wonderful that he does that sparring with Beatnik Ghost series over the years, and
In
he
fact,
decided he really wanted to do that.
he just sent me something for Burning Hearts. So
Awesome. Yeah, he's
yeah,
really so cool. He's really
yeah,
so cool. So that's exciting. I mean, it's neat. Years ago at the Iguana Cafe back in the late 80s, there was where I met a lot of the people, like Amelie and Matthew
right.
Mars and Nelson Gary, all these people. And there seems to be different eras where a lot of people coalesce and meet each other. This feels like a really powerful era that way where people, cross-pollination and it's wonderful. And
Yeah.
it's a miracle kind of. I always love Zoom too because look at how people are all over, and here we are. We're all over the country. It's very cool. And Alex, you're doing so many cool things. So
Thank
thank you
you.
for having this salon like event.
Really
It's very
was
cool.
really was the idea is to have a salon. I think I was if I didn't mention Lyric Rivera, aka Neurodivergent Rebel, and then Daniel Yaryan and Chat Home, and then gosh, I there's so many people. Once you scratch the surface, then you start to find all these amazing people. And like for example, when I did this show, it was a spontaneous thing with Chad Holm, and then he told me about all of the incredible and people really should watch the thing that I did with Chad because Dan Denton said it was sort of like a 101 course on the underground poetry scene, really. Because we talked about Burroughs, we talked about Thompson, we talked about, you know, the maybe and Wendell Berry, and so it's really I'm really really grateful the opportunity to do not only humanitarian work, which I really think of as sort of like this collective paw idea, which is the name of my I wanted to form a production company, a title company for to produce our films called Collective Paw. Also, I I want to have Emily back on the show because I created the Collective Paw Award in recognition of as people who know Emily Frank know that she's a fixture of the LA arts scene and a really a benevolent, powerful, important, patron and sort of compassionate goddess of, and Lynn Bronstein. How could I forget Lynn Bronstein and their cats? So shout out to Lynn Bronstein as well, and Michael Duckwall and Jeffrey and Jade Thomas. And so I think that's probably about it. So um, there's always the possibility that we would hear from Pickles. Okay. Um, but in any event, okay, so Pickles, I'm gonna end this podcast. Uh, what I thought I heard of Pickles.
No, that was me giggling.
Oh, okay. So I just want to say that I love this woman so much. She's my heart, and I want the world to know that. And I couldn't have done it without Pickles. None of this would have been possible. Okay. We created this show. We created this show, and out of just sheer tenacity and stubbornness, and in the words of you know Alea's poem "Blood Red," um, there's a line, "No bitch, we ain't dead yet." And hopefully, when we have her back on the show, she'll read Blood Red because it's genius. And who loves this poem? Susan Schwartz. Did I mention Susan Schwartz? Okay, or Susan Schwartz is another friend of ours who's contributing to the Burning Hearts. She wrote some official Star Trek novelizations. She's badass. She has a PhD in English literature from Harvard. Okay, that's badass. I know I haven't even mentioned the, that, certainly I never went to Harvard, but my books are in Harvard's Widener Library. But so the wattage in terms of the intellectual achievement of these women as well. Alexis attended, Yale University, as did my dad, Stephen M. Johnson. Vanessa is a Stanford graduate, and
And there's
so
also Shirley Jacqueline
and
Lim,
Shirley,
who ran the
thank you,
creative
Shirley.
writing program at UC Santa Barbara.
Yes, Shirley is a brilliant, amazing, poet and just an amazing human. And thank you for reminding me of her. She's very, very central to the Burning Hearts. So at any rate, I love you all so much. And we do this, it's a kind of a tradition, the Small Bear show. It's called Squeezy Hug. Now, I know I always look forward to this. So it's just very simple. You just kind of, go like this, squeezins, and you just go like that. And so this has been Small Bear. This has been Alexis Johnson, Alexis Krasilovsky, Vanessa Hedwig Smith, Ellyn Maybe, Ossiana Tepfenhart, and Alea Celeste Williams. This has been a great time. Once again, Small Bear Show. We do this every week, and we have some of the most distinguished, exciting, interesting people working today in the arts. And okay, that's it. I love you so much. Bye bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Sorry about the
Thank you.
cats
Thank
again.
you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.